Sure.
And then I think it would be a good opportunity to kind of show um, over time a lot of our ideas and the ways that we were doing things and have been doing things and will continue to do things are becoming increasingly organized.
Hmm.
It is really simple in its essence, but I will say that even as I finish the second Gong book, which is, and I'll put this into, let's just look at the whiteboard because
Hmm.
when you left, it was probably, and when I say left, I just mean the group studies. I know you've probably had this practice somewhat in your peripheral, you know.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
In my version of it,
right.
what I can remember.
But we're calling the practice Gong, and you could add Gong Fa, which means mind, intention. Fa could be art or method, depending
Hmm.
on how it's being used in a sentence. Um, but Gong is actually something that I didn't necessarily invent. So
Hmm.
Gong is a word that is actually a phrase that has already been used. It's just not utilized, especially in the West.
Hmm.
So is something that we call Yang Sheng, and I'll write that down. And it may seem like a lot of this is starting to go towards or reflect traditional Chinese medicine and fit nicely into all of that. And that's no coincidence. We'll probably see that to some extent more and more. But Yangsheng equals nurturing life, basically. Nurturing life. And it is also a part of traditional Chinese medicine. But again, it's an aspect of traditional Chinese medicine that didn't really catch on in the West as much. And when in the 1950s, when the Chinese government basically wanted to make they invented traditional Chinese medicine from ancient Chinese medicine to package it so that it could be something that is more disseminated or disseminatable, which probably isn't a word, but something that can be disseminated all around the world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So Yang Sheng kind of fell to the wayside. Um, as we know in in the Western culture, the focus is not on preventative medicine. It just isn't. Um, Sometimes people want to switch to preventative after they've gotten sick, and it's like, yeah, I get it. That could be a catalyst, and that's fine. But ultimately, what Qigong is a very potent form of mind management. So Qigong has now 5 phases. The first phase is actually, in my opinion, the easiest. Definitely not counterbalance, sorry. And these phrases should sound very familiar because while everything is being refined and organized, it is still retaining a lot of the essence of our meetings over the last 5 years. So basic alignment can just boil down to, if we want to use this word because we understand it, that's fine, but we could call it basic mindfulness or basic mindful intent, which is my preference.
So,
Mindful intent over the word mindfulness.
basic alignment would be the three pillars, like,
Yeah, you know,
yes, okay.
presence, we used to call the 3 pillars presence,
Yeah,
mindfulness, and deliberate attention.
okay, good.
I would
Yep.
say that those 3 pillars, although we don't quite talk about them that way as much anymore, is ever present throughout this entire system.
Okay.
That is the system.
Yes.
But basic alignment focuses on presence, the presence portion,
Okay.
which is really, and so when you get Gong, basic alignment, book one, it will just have basic strategies. And the primary strategy is intending points of attention. And this is what makes the system original to us as well, because this is not in anything I have ever seen ever, period. I haven't seen it. I'm sure it exists somewhere in the world that wants to take my mind into a tangent, but I won't. Intending points in advance. The tangent that I was going to go on that I won't is talking about how ideas around the world emerged at almost the exact same time, despite them being separated by space and time. The Greeks were actually coming up with a trinary system, while the Chinese were coming up with a binary yin yang system at right around the exact same time. And then they started to go away from ancestral, not ancestral worship, but everything is ancestors, to a little bit of etho, a little bit, or excuse me, a little bit of logic.
Mhm.
And the Chinese were doing that at about the same time within the same context. And also around the world, other indigenous tribes to this continent, they were actually also starting to interject empirical observation and logic and deduction into their culture, more than just everything is the ancestors up. You got a pimple on your forehead, it's because you pissed your ancestor off.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So basic alignment, in my estimation, is the easiest of the phases of change. And I'm calling them phases because they're not levels. I'm calling them layers because you don't level up. It's not, forget about level 4 because you're at level 5 now, and level 6, and we're always looking for them. It doesn't really work that way. The base that we build is built upon continuously for the rest of our lives. So we'll always be practicing basic alignment, even when we go into these other layers of the practice. Does that make sense so far? This is a nice overview.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can interject while you're sipping coffee. Santina, this is just Ernest has refined and fine-tuned the organization that we had started with T and the pillars. And so this is the way that he's explaining it. So this is a good overview, as he said. But I'm sending you right now, when we were going to start from the beginning and talk about things so that he could record it, and we started with the 3 pillars. Actually, he asked me to start the beginning stuff, and I started with the 3 pillars, and then that's when Ernest decided, you know what, we're just going to talk about 20 essential topics. And this is the new structure of how the phases work, and some new definitions that he's going over with you, which is a really good review. But I'm going to send you right now a link to the 20 topics that we discussed every
Beautiful.
Tuesday for a bunch of weeks. And they're on YouTube, so you might want to listen to those because it's helpful.
Absolutely.
It was
Now,
really
if I take my old notebook, could I lay these 20 topics, go in my notebook and put it next to what my, each phase? Yes?
Yes, it definitely parallels, but they're not in any specific order. They're
Okay.
I mean, they sort of build on each other, but it's this is the structure that he's doing right now,
Okay.
and that structure could be a transparency over your notes about how you get from the basics to the engaging the space more.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
But the topics are clarifying for terminology, and so we're all talking about the same thing, and so that we're meeting on the same page. They don't necessarily follow a very specific order. There is an order, but it's not a hard and fast.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome.
I just got the link.
Hi, Karen. Good morning. And then here's why our group is staying steady at, between 5, 10, 15 people, is because counterbalance is not easy. I'm just going to say that. And I put that into the Gong book because experientially, I would be lying if I said that counterbalance simple? Yes, it is beautifully simple. It is so simple, so clear, so easy to understand. And because our thought has accumulated so much momentum in our life, and that's a principle that people often forget, is the momentum principle. They forget it in everyday, in the everyday world. And then sometimes even in our Gong practice, we're like, well, why is this so difficult? Or why does this feel this way? Or, why did I end up coasting and things like this? Because of the energy of momentum. Our habits have a lot of momentum. The way that we think has a lot of momentum, not just the way that we think, the sheer amount of thought from the time that we wake up, from the time that we go to bed. Very likely for most people joining our group at any point in their life will be decades of momentum, at least, if not half a century for some folks of thought-based momentum. So this is counterbalance.
And also, I think we underestimate, at least I underestimate the amount of the building of a practice. So not falling into default thinking and falling into the momentum and the habit means I must be doing something else, and that's creating a practice. And creating a practice like learning to play tennis or learning to write or learning to walk, it takes time and attention and embodiment to do so. So as much as you underestimate, we may as a collective underestimate the power of habit and momentum that we've already accumulated that keep us repeating things, we also tend to underestimate the amount of practice that's required to build new habits and new momentum and new ways of being. It's creating a practice, and that practice needs to be, the more you embody it, the smoother it goes. But it's a bumpy process, and success and failure, if you want to even frame it that way, the bumps are expected. It's just because you understand it and it resonates with you and it makes perfect sense doesn't mean you can practice it. The practice is the doing that has to be done.
Yeah, that's essential.
Well,
So,
that's in addition to what makes it harder. Well, that's why it's
yeah.
simple. It's simple to understand, but harder to do.
Mm-hmm. And it will even feel difficult at times because the pull to think a certain way, or to think a certain amount of thoughts, or to try to solve challenges and, navigate life's changes with immense amounts of repetitive, habitual thought that doesn't necessarily lead towards inspiration. So that should sound familiar, because that's our good old trusty, pretty much since we started this, we've had the rule of three. So that's not something that's new at all. One thing that I clarify in book 2, which is called the Tai Chi mind, which is the counterbalance phase of Gong. One thing I mention in counterbalance is that one thing that we're not doing is suppressing thought and emotion. We're not avoiding thought and emotion. We're not trying to use force to prevent thought and emotion. What we do is, with counterbalance, is we do what any human being is capable of doing, recognizing where we are, recognizing where we want to go, and then just taking the action steps necessary to get moving in that direction. I use the example in Gong book 2 of a basement being flooded. That's a challenge, probably not going to have a lot of success just, sitting there wishing that the basement will recede and that everything will return to normal. Maybe, I don't think so though. So that would be a form of passivity. I don't recommend passivity with things like that. That's not going to benefit us. Same thing with certain types of thought patterns that are repetitive, habitual, not making us feel inspired. If we just allow those thoughts to continue, we're being passive, and that will drive an emotional response to a different emotional response, to a different emotional response, to an underlining mood that also breeds other emotional and responses and other thoughts. So it creates this vicious cycle that most people have actually been swimming in for the vast majority of their life experience, has been just this cycle. It's very cyclical. So we also don't want to try to suppress our thoughts. We don't want to try to avoid certain types of thoughts, because that's a doing. You're actively trying to suppress. You're actively trying to avoid. And that's a type of energy. If you think counterbalance and redirection feels difficult, trying to force a thought out of your mind is even more difficult. I don't know if you've ever gone from a very rowdy mind that's moving very quickly and then tried to meditate. Most people, and they'll say, well, no, I would say that's just not going to work, because if you could do that, if you could meditate it instantly away, very likely the thought stream would have never gotten the momentum that it has, right? So the idea is that we don't want to be passive to unproductive thinking. And I don't really use good or bad, because that can be very subjective, but productive and unproductive can actually be quite defined, specifically in how it's making you feel. but we don't want to be passive and just let these thoughts run us over. We don't want to try to use a lot of force. That may work, you know, it may have a temporary effect. There are some forms of cognitive therapies that it's really just trying to use brute force. And I don't know, it might work, it might not. That's not Qigong though. So I don't want to overly judge other approaches, but that's definitely not Qigong style. What we do is the Tai Chi. Tai Chi is a redirection. So if you can imagine somebody is about to punch you, and Tai Chi is a martial art. So, you know, that's why I'll introduce that type of analogy. But if somebody were trying to punch you in the face, passivity is probably not going to benefit you. You know, passivity would just be standing there and letting somebody just punch you square in the jaw. That's probably not going to be, at the end of the day, I don't think you'll chalk that up as a good idea. But you could try to use force. And like I mentioned, that could work. You know, Donna could stop the fist in midair, you know, with her chi. Her defensive chi just repels the fist. That's cool. But even, you know, I kind of made that up using defensive chi because that's not how defensive chi works, Wei Chi. But even if it did, eventually that energy is going to start to wane because it comes from somewhere. So the idea is that the more force we exert, eventually we have to replenish that energy and we will no longer be able to resist that force. So that's why I have observed a lot of times people who do seek certain types of cognitive therapies, it doesn't always stick, or it's just a one-to-one ratio. They're just helping with this one behavior that is inspired by this one thought process that came from, you know, when I was a small child. And again, you know, that's a type of approach that could be beneficial for some people. So I don't want to, you know, seem as if I'm declaring war. It's just that Qigong doesn't do that. That's it. What we do is when that punch is coming in, we simply use the force that's coming and redirect that force a different direction. In terms of Qigong, we redirect back to our practice, which is basic alignment. You redirect back to your pre-intended points of attention. You use your own internal voice to help make that happen. You can use mantras, you can use, in Counterbalance book 2, I talk about the voice of logic. You can use logical statements in your mind to help diffuse certain illogical patterns. You'll find that almost all of our dysfunctional patterns are simultaneously illogical. And those dysfunctional patterns that aren't productive are what's creating these emotional and behavioral responses that are also not productive. So when we redirect, we're not avoiding, we're not trying to suppress, we're not trying to bury our heads in the sand. The basement's still flooded. We're not pretending that it's not, but we're going to do so without all of the mental interference. And then before you know it, oh, in the Qigong book I mentioned, you could use brute force and clear out the basement bucket by bucket. And then you'll look and be like, wait, there actually could have been a much better, I could have just called a service or something, or, you know, done something different rather than bucket by bucket, which is using force. A lot of times, the only interference in accomplishing a goal or getting to where we want to go is in our own mind. So if we clear our mind first, solutions become more clear, solutions to the challenges, such as somebody wanting to punch you in the face, or the basement is flooding, or you have unproductive thought patterns that are starting to build and gain momentum. So counterbalance is the most difficult phase in the Qigong practice, because it is the beginning of interacting with your own thought processes. Basic alignment doesn't do that, because we really just need to practice remembering our points of attention, get an idea of what that is and how to do it and why we're doing it. And then we see why that's so important and why that's such a unique feature of the Qigong system. I have never seen deliberately intend your points of attention in advance. I've never seen that in any form of mindfulness. I've never read that in any book. I've never gotten that from any guru or dead master or anything like that. That's something that we have arrived with in the creation of the Qigong system. Any questions about those first two layers of the practice?
I have a question on passivity.
Passivity, sure.
Yeah. So if you're practicing and you're thinking less, doesn't passivity increase anyway?
No, because you're doing something. Remember, Donna said that we're never just sitting around with our mind blank, you know, we have a practice. So we're putting our mind in specific areas. We're doing things with our cognition. And so we're never really being passive. We're being highly engaging with our environment. And you'll see
Mentally, we're talking then just mentally. Is
yeah.
that
Well,
right?
no, mentally and physically. So for
How
example,
physically?
I'm
How
working,
physically?
for example, I'm working through a doctorate program. And if I would have done this doctorate program 10 years ago, I would have quit by now because there's certain things that I don't necessarily agree with, or I don't like the way it's being taught. You know, we have somebody, a teacher, very nice, in case she rewatches this video, which is not likely, but I just want you to know that you are a nice teacher and I like you. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but she just reads the slides. And I'm like, you know, I could do that on my own. And before, that would have been a cognitive roadblock. I would have shut down. I would have turned off the Zoom. I would have dropped out of the classes. But because my mind is not interfering, I'm able to do what I want to do without wasting as much energy, without wasting as many thought processes. And you could even get down to caloric intake. I'm not wasting my physical energy, you know, being led by a mind that is constantly acting out habitual patterns. So I am psychologically not passive because I'm engaging my environment. I'm physically not passive because I'm getting everything done. Like, so when you look at Yang Sheng, which is, and then I'll get to Donna in just one second. When you look at Yang Sheng, which is nurturing life, which is a system of embodying traditional Chinese medicine, I'm doing everything in that book, and I'm doing it without force, without trying to control. It's not difficult. I just need to remember, but I'm getting everything that I want to do in my life done. And because my mind is so intentional, that is the law of attraction. Everything is exactly where I put it. So my computer is situated exactly how I want it. This pegboard, this whiteboard, those are not coincidences. You know, I've put those there for very specific reasons. And everything around me is very relaxed, very organic, but everything in my life is flourishing and growing. My personal health, my personal relationships, my social relationships, my career, my art, everything is flourishing and growing. And that is not passivity. It's because I've gotten out of the way. Those cycles in my mind have been broken because I'm too busy doing my Qigong practice and engaging my life. And for example, as we get a little bit later into the system, I create essentially what looks like a pyramid, and it begins with appreciation and contentment, cultivating these things. So no, under no circumstances, if this practice is being embodied, do we just kind of, I think I was going to make a post on Facebook where sometimes contentment is associated with stagnation. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because if you're content, you get what we call just do energy. You can get everything done without toiling and trying and thinking these patterns that ultimately just take us out of flow. Does that make sense, Santina? And then we'll let Donna add to that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Yep.
I'm just thinking how I would have answered that question. And I just assumed that when Santina asked just mentally, right? Not physically. And you eloquently described how the physical aspects of your life change as well with a mindfulness practice. But there is a physical element to the practice. It's not just a mind, attention, intention on thought or away from thought or changing it to a different thought. It is attention on the body also. It's not just physical practice. I wake up in the morning and I have my points of attention. I also engage in some type of physical practice. I am aware of my feet on the floor do all day long. I'm aware of my breath all day long. My steps forward. So there's a physical, and I think actually now that Ernest has fine-tuned this organization, there is more for me. Maybe it's just because of what I was ready to hear. It might have always been there, but there's more physical, there's more attention to the physical because there's no separation between mind and body. We are one, we are having a human experience, and our body is part of it. And our body is a way that we express, and the way we output and take in information is through this form as well, on an energetic level. So attention to the body physically is as much a part of the system as, because your attention on your body and your body in space is part of embodying attention. So there's sensory attention training, there's cognitive attention training. Yeah, and then that in turn affects our behavior. Why am I doing this? So what I'm doing is can be thinking, or it can be physical. How am I responding? Is all of this deliberate? It's, mindfulness is just deliberate attention on the moment, and that includes your body. So it is physical as well as mental, as well as cognitive.
Right. And then this is kind of a hidden thing because it doesn't really come out until much later in the system. But ultimately, Gong originally, when the Chinese started to create this system, was a way to interact with the energy body directly. And counterbalance and basic alignment are quite far away from that. It's already happening, but not quite as intentional as it can happen later. So it comes from the term Yi leads Qi, which is the mind's intention. Intention leads everything. When you put your hand up, you intended that. And it's actually me just doing this just looked like me raising my hand. When you really learn about cellular biology and anatomy, everything that had to occur for me just to raise my hand is absolutely amazing. And it is a great example of the fundamental of how intention alone can be a catalyst for many physical, psychological, and energy effects. So ultimately, when we get much later in the system, that is the most beneficial thing that we can do for our health, period. There's all kinds of other things that are really great, and I fully support them. This kind of goes to that old thing that people would talk about, like Deepak Chopra's book, Creating Health, that our mind can create our health. Most people don't really believe that, even if they say it. It's not something that they know. It's still in the belief, and belief isn't knowing. Those are two different words.
But you can't even get near that if you're not, when I'm sitting in this class, if I am passively listening, then I'm easily distracted.
Sure.
But if I am listening and I am aware of my posture and the golden line and all of that we talk about, and the temperature of the room, and my heavy elbows and my the warmth of my coffee cup, I can do all of that and listen. I was going to say, and listen attentively also, but it actually helps me to listen more attentively because I am deliberate with my senses. I'm deliberate with my behavior, which is attention to my posture. Then my cognition, it's easier for me to quiet my thoughts. Right, to listen actively is more accessible to me because I am engaged. I am deliberately choosing my points of attention, which absolutely include my body. In the beginning of this practice, when we were doing tea and the pillars, I'd forget my body all the time. It was always the first thing to go. I wanted to think more, understand more, think harder, think better. It had nothing to do with engaging my body. And now I can't not, because that state of being is not preferred anymore, because it's only it's a fragmented way of being to me now.
Makes so much sense. Thank you.
Yep. And so, the reason I write the primary goal of helping a person learn to direct chi is because that's where all of this is coming from. Because there's one thing primarily that is really interrupting the natural flow of our energy between our environment, within ourselves, and our connection to the infinite fabric of the cosmos is our own cognition, our own thought processes, which lead to our behaviors, which our behaviors add up. And then before you know it, nothing in our body is really flowing how it should. And then, of course, that's where acupuncture comes in. That's where, you know, the different forms of therapy of traditional Chinese medicine come in, because really all they want to do is help encourage natural flow so that the body can do its own healing, which is great. And so there's no surprise that I would be attracted to that type of thing. However, that's exactly the reason that we need basic alignment and counterbalance. Is in order for the energy to flow more smoothly, we have to learn to be more present. We have to actively engage. You know, Donna talked about actively listening. We have to actively live. We have to exist above what we call, this is conscious awareness, above the threshold of active recognition, where we're aware that we're aware. Not a distinctly human characteristic, but it's a pretty rare characteristic among life on Earth. We take it to a whole nother field. I was going to say a whole nother level, but you know me and the word level. So let's back up a little bit. So we have our ultimate goal of Gong. We will be able to intend smoother flow of energy. And when that happens, everything in your life will improve. Career will improve. Social interactions will improve. Goals in life, you know, what we want to do, what we want to create will become more intelligent. We will become infinitely more healthy. And you don't have to eat necessarily a particular way, although, you know, there are ways to eat that will be more beneficial to the carbon-based life form than other ways. But ultimately, what we're looking to do is interact with energy directly. And that takes something, you know, it's not just something that we just, you know, we're doing it actually all the time, but we're not doing it all the time deliberately, intentionally, and willfully, which is what we're learning to do. So that begins with basic alignment, and it really begins with intending points of attention in advance. That's the key. That's how we prevent self-hustle. That's how we prevent coasting. That's how we prevent, you know, all of the ways that we deceive ourselves. We think we're doing something, but then when we're actually looking, we're like, okay, no, I guess I wasn't really practicing. Well, intending your points of attention in advance and having a diverse toolbox of tricks of attention, we've called it that pretty much since day one, 5 years ago. We've called them tricks of attention. If our toolbox is diverse, we're always doing something with our mind. Like, I never walk out of the door passive. I walk out of the door wide awake, clear cognition. I feel my body. I feel my chi. I feel the breath of the planet. Like, I'm walking in activity, but it's not force. It's not trying to control. It's not trying to manipulate. It's going with rather than against. We use this word alignment. People use this word alignment all the time. Alignment to what? Where's the context? What are we aligning to? Like, the source? What is source? Like, we need some definition, or otherwise it's very difficult to understand what we're talking about when we're using general and abstract terms that don't really. We're aligned to the moment, how the moment itself is moving. How that's the way that we become so adaptable is because we're so in tune or attuned with the moment as it moves, as it changes, as balance continues to evolve. And that's what these first two phases or layers of change really prime us for. Does that make sense so far? And then I can briefly describe the next phases.
Yes.
Cool. So then we move on. A person could stop right here. And I think that it will change their life, to especially if they maintain their practice until the day that they transition to something new. And I mean death. This is a lifelong commitment to practice. It's not a weekend course or leveling up and transdimensionally yada yada. It's none of that. It is a lifelong commitment to being present, deliberately intending our attention. It is a lifelong commitment to flow and to learning and growing. No perfection, no images of this is what we all want to be like, because that's a bunch of bullshit. Those are things that really originated as organized systems and sometimes unorganized systems of control. We create a deity figure, chastise you for everything that's not that deity figure, and then make you feel guilty so that you force yourself into a particular posture. This isn't doing that. This is, we will be learning and growing for the rest of our lives. And it involves being present and managing our mind. That's really what it's about. It's not about control. It's about management. And when we manage our mind, we automatically manage our emotions. We automatically manage our energy. We automatically manage our life situations more efficiently, more productively for ourselves. And because of the nature of compassion and our interconnectedness with all things, a lot of our actions, if not all of our actions and all of our thoughts and all of our energy is also beneficial for the species. We stop hurting one another. We stop being unkind. Those things are incongruent. We don't need to write out morals, because when this isn't getting in the way, we will automatically treat everything else with a type of kindness and compassion and respect that it deserves. So basic alignment and counterbalance can quite frankly exist on their own, and you will be good. However, if a person wants to fully embody, and fully embody means to interject this into every aspect of your life experience, just to maybe see how far you can take it, maybe see what you can create, and what you can do with your mind and your body and your life within your lifetime. Because we could do quite a lot. We get into the phase that I call warrior training. And this should all sound familiar, because these are a lot of the same phrases that we've used before. It's just being organized a little bit differently. And warrior training starts to introduce physical practices, more traditional physical practice, standing meditation, moving meditation, start to look at the way that we're eating and drinking. And again, we will never subtract. I really follow and I recommend and promote a system of tiny additions. Tiny additions over time will equal a lot of change. And the catalyst is already there. The catalyst is basic alignment and counterbalance. So warrior training starts to fully embody with more formal practice in addition to and we never stop the informal, but at this point, we're not afraid to add some formal practices. Like, we should be A-okay. In fact, it should be somewhat desirable. I think warrior training will be something that a person will really want. And the prerequisite is an unbending desire to have inner peace, to feel inner peace. And that inner peace is a mind that is no longer at war with itself or its environment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So more formal practices are introduced. And I don't go crazy. So in warrior training, we're not going to go hardcore formal practices, but I will offer some. And I will also provide the outline and the principles so that a person can do whatever they want. But we do need to start to in warrior training, because we're intensifying our training, we do need to take into consideration some of our factors that we didn't really look at in basic alignment and counterbalance. Does that make sense?
Could you just highlight where remembering and forgetting are in these different things? Because that basic, simple explanation makes it clearer.
Well, remember,
and it also makes it clearer that Santina started this class by saying, I have to start all over again. And my response to that was, I start all over again the second I open my eyes. Like a lot of the momentum has accumulated, so it may be more accessible for me, but there are battlegrounds or changes, like moving away from your family and being in a totally different environment, that require me to to start over, you know, I notice that I forget and I have to pick it up again, and it all falls into place pretty quickly because of my habit and momentum, but I have to do it sometimes frequently during the day, depending on what's occurring.
Mhm.
You know, I had some illnesses, I was in the hospital, you know, had things happen. And I had to go back to basic alignment practice several times.
Well, you look fantastic.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that makes sense. So ultimately that's, you know, where we go next with hydrostasy, and that's what warrior training is priming us for. But in basic alignment, and I point this out in the Gong books, in basic alignment, we're going to forget. We're going to forget a lot. We're going to remember our points of attention, if it's colors, if it's shape, if it's body awareness, if it's breath awareness, if it's particular words or mantras, objects of power. There's all kinds of things. We have an infinite access to points of attention, and you can be wildly creative. I recommend a lot, of course, because I do this. But, you know, Donna has a different lifestyle. She does different things. We have, you know, people who knit, people who swim in the sea, people who live in the big city like me. So, you know, our points of attention can vary for sure. And in basic alignment, you're going to forget a lot. It's just the bottom line. You forget a lot and then you remember. The moment you remember, and I pointed this out in both books, the moment you remember, you're actually back in practice. Because what are you doing? You're aware of the moment, you're aware of yourself, you're aware that you have forgotten, and you are actually getting back on track the moment that you remember. And
You're operating above the threshold of active
exactly.
recognition.
You had to recognize that you weren't above the threshold of active recognition, which is an amazing thing about the human mind. So we have some amazing aspects of human cognition that are almost, some are completely inaccessible and some are less accessible because we're too busy giving all of our energy to thought. That is hogging the available tools. Like, let's say that you have, I don't know, a cell phone and it has 100 apps, and all of these apps are amazing. Like, you can do so much with these different apps, but yet we just choose Facebook all the time. That's our only app. We just sit there, Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. Nothing wrong with Facebook. That was the app that I chose. And we're just Facebook, 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 all the time, every day. That's all we access. Every now and then we're like, I'd like to go on vacation and do some Instagram or some, you know, LinkedIn or whatever. And I'm just using these as really generic examples, but I'll go on vacation and enjoy some LinkedIn or something like that. What we're learning to do is to balance all of the apps on this screen, and we learn to access things that may have been pages on our cell phone. You know, we have to slide quite a bit before we can even, such as learning to interact with energy directly. Every single culture and tradition that I have ever experienced requires a person to balance their mind before they interact with energy directly. Chinese, even like Greek and European mythologies and forms of spiritual beliefs, and especially indigenous cultures to North and South America. If you wanted to do some of the things that they say a human can do, you could not do it with mind interference. Does that make sense? It's inaccessible. So we're not skipping steps and we're not pretending. A lot of times people, they want to try to skip steps. They just want to, you know, they want to trans-dimensionally port to Alpha Centauri so that they can speak with aliens. It's like, what are you going to do when you get there? Oh, they don't want you there because your mind is too dysfunctional. You're just going to create dysfunction everywhere you go. So there's a prerequisite for this type of thing. And it is learning to balance your own and manage your own cognition. So yeah, in counterbalance, we start to remember a little bit more. So we're starting to remember a little bit more than we forget, and that's great. I would actually say in basic alignment, we're forgetting almost all the time, and we remember in intervals. In counterbalance, we do start to remember more. In warrior training, we are really putting some effort into starting to maintain. We want longer periods of deliberate attention. Does that make sense? And then eventually As Donna pointed out, she can't even imagine not being aware of her body, because eventually we become so familiar with our practice that we are remembering almost all the time. I cannot remember the last time that I wasn't at least aware of my mind, my body, and my position in proprioception, my position in space and time. Now, I may lose the breath. I may lose my trick of imagination. I may lose other tricks of attention as the world starts to get a little bumpy or challenges start to arise. And that's really what we learn to do through the course of our entire life, is we learn to maintain more of our steadiness in these times of turmoil. In the time and sometimes these times of turmoil are cause and effect. It could be a tornado, it could be a hurricane, it could be space junk falling from the sky, it could be the transitioning of a loved one or an animal that we love. These things will happen. But again, we're not putting our head in the sand and just pretending the world doesn't exist. We're not, it is some, and I'm just going to go off on a little bit of tangent. When I hear a lot of things from Abraham Hicks, not Abraham Hicks, but the interpretation and how things are circulated and shared, it lacks compassion. It lacks the understanding of the interconnected nature of all things. And for me, that means that we are moving so far away from the base, the connection to the infinite, that now it's all just self-serving. It's all about me, it's all about I, and it can be very was it intended that way? Was it initially taught that way? Very likely no. Very likely, if you ask the question, Abraham Hicks would make it very clear that that's not what was intended necessarily by the statement. But very often that's what's picked up, that's what the memes are, and it is going so far away from the interconnected nature of all things, and that is, and then giving a damn about it is compassion. Now, compassion is something that will arise automatically. Kindness is something that will arise automatically. The more that we connect to the world around us, it's impossible, in my opinion, to connect to the world around you without interference and not care about it, not want to improve it. It happens on its own. And I think that the more that people do this practice, the more that evidence is going to come to the surface. And we'll see that empirically as well. So warrior training moves into a stage, a layer of training that I call hydrostasy. Hydrostasy is embodiment. This is when we start to manage our embodiment, but we are embodying. And at this point, I'll be perfectly honest, it is easier. It is. It just is. We have more momentum. We're not losing our points of attention. We're far more adaptable. And then before you know it, you look around and every single aspect of your life experience is where you put it, is where you wanted it to. Everything is always where you put it, no matter what. Everybody listening to this, if you look around, that's you. Like whether it was below or above the threshold of active recognition, you created it. But with hydrostasy, we are creating consciously, intentionally, willfully, and in a perspective that acknowledges the interconnected matrix of all things, all life, all non-life, everything in the universe, and we proceed accordingly. I experienced this firsthand, where the younger generation talks a lot of shit. They have a lot of good ideas, and their personal behavior does not reflect that at all. Sorry, not sorry, but I see it every single day. And again, that's a generalization, because there are some young people out there who are walking their walk to the best of their ability, but there are some who are extremely idealistic. They got a lot of shit floating around in their brain that they think sounds good, but then their behavior is so far away from that it's laughable. In hydrostasy, this is behavioral attention training, and the alignment between behavior and the practice.
Well, I think there's no practice. I mean, I resembled that statement you just made. I was really interested in a lot of ideas. I was reading Carlos Castaneda in middle school, and a lot of things resonated with me, but I didn't know how to put any of it into practice. I was a mess. So it was only when I was high and listening to music and reading these books and, at the Arboretum, that I could even have a taste of what any of it meant, but I didn't know how to incorporate it into my life because there was no practice there. So I wasn't walking the walk. I wasn't even talking the talk because there was really nobody to talk to about it. But that whole hippie peace movement, it was a lot of talk and not a lot of behavior.
Well, there was behavior.
There was behavior, but it was all the interpretation. It's just like you said about Abraham Hicks. The interpretation gets diluted in, we're all one, man. But what does that mean? It doesn't just mean getting high and going to concerts. There's more to it than that.
Wait, what? That was the next phase, was just get high and go to concerts. That was after hydrostasy.
Oh, good. I know how to do that.
But that's interesting that Donna used Carlos Castaneda as an example, because if Donna really would have taken some time to notice, every single book in that series focused on trying to teach Carlos how to stop his internal self-talk. Everything in the Warrior's Way in terms of sorcery, and I don't do sorcery, I'm not into that. I'm into preventative self-care and preventative medicine. That's my thing. Herbs and all that kind of stuff is cool with me. But if you were interested in turning into a bird or transdimensionally, doing these things in the Carlos Castaneda series, you can't until you learn one very important skill: mind management, stopping internal dialogue. And there's a lot of things that
I could only do that with substances. And when I was trying to do it in my regular life, the only thing I got up to was noticing how nobody was and how everything imposed on me was counterproductive to that. And so I just shut down. I was either engaged in what I thought was fun or I was shut down, and that's it.
Yeah.
There was no formal practice at all.
Mm-hmm. That's a very common theme in the world today. A lot of good ideas, but not a lot of practice, not a lot of anything really occurring. So, or there are a lot of things occurring, but they're using so much force and so much energy to do it that other areas of their life are drastically suffering, which is where Yang Sheng comes in, because that will address every single aspect of the human experience: sexuality, family, friends, food, exercise, everything, sleep, everything. And it's not done in you have to do things this way. That's the Western way. The Western way creates a plate, and you're supposed to eat this way and this way and this way. And that's supposed to be for all 350 million Americans, or 600 million Americans. Is it 300 or 600? I don't know. Millions and millions of Americans. So it's like, the way that Yang Sheng and traditional Chinese medicine will look at it is, you are different every single day. However, in order to really understand and be able to discern those differences, you need cognitive attention training. You need sensitivity to yourself and to the moment, so that how can you know what's good to eat today if you're not even paying attention to the seasons, if you're not paying attention to your own cycles, if you're not really paying attention to how you feel? It doesn't add up. So
it's not excluded from the life that you're living. It includes the macro and the micro. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so hydrostasy is mostly felt at a certain point. Our practice is all, we can feel when we're in balance. We can feel when we're out of balance because we're so present. We're learning to go with the cycles of the world around us, etc. So hydrostasy is mostly felt, and that's when we'll really start to interject Yang Sheng. That's the perfect time to, okay, we're in hydrostasy. We're not declaring war. We're always aware of our attention and our at least our body, if not our breath, if not our direction of overall cognition. We will be aware of those things. And now it's the perfect time to start to look at every aspect of our life, because we can look at it in a kind of a less personal way. We can say, oh, well, I know why I was eating cheeseburgers every other day. That's the way I was raised. And I don't have to declare war on cheeseburgers necessarily, but I know how that's making me feel, you know, because I'm so used to paying attention to my body. I'm actually starting to feel my energy body more, and you can feel what disrupts it. Have you ever had a big fast food meal and everything just feels bland afterwards? Energy starts to go low. It's like, like I'm technically full. And a few moments ago, I was technically hungry, but I don't feel nourished. I don't feel good. It tasted good because of the chemical properties of the food and the chemical preferences of our brain, because that's all taste is. It's a chemical experience. Minerals, chemicals, same, you know, pretty much the same thing when we put it into that context. So hydrostasy, we are aware of our behavior. We are able to change and adapt based on how we feel because we're ever present. We're becoming more familiar with these things. And now is the perfect opportunity for us to say, hey, that 3 hours of sleep a night, that's going to add up. How do I feel after I get 3 hours of sleep? Well, I need 6 Red Bulls. So how do the 6 Red Bulls make you feel? Well, they make me feel energized until they make me feel shitty. So we'll be more aware of these things. And naturally, I would never say, hey, Donna, about those 3 Red Bulls in the morning, I don't need to, because she's going to be so ever present. She's going to look at that Red Bull and be like, this isn't in balance for me. I can feel that this is no longer, or never has been, in balance for my mind and my body. So it's still very individual. It's not judgy. That's important. I don't want to create something that's just a bunch of judgment and a bunch of trying to control and more organized systems of control. No offense, but a lot of Buddhism can start to look like that. Not all Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh was like, Buddhism is a practice. It can be combined to everything. And that's why I love Thich Nhat Hanh. Other people are, thou shalt eat right. Thou shalt think right, right thought, right action, right morals. And that's all, that's just trying to make shit up for other people. And it can become very, very judgy. I don't like it. So I'm not into that. Which is why, you know, I'll have a certified yoga 200-hour, but I'm not into all of the, yeah. And there are other ways to look at it, I'm sure, and ways to present it that sound less dogmatic. But I'm not down with dogma. That's not cool. Okay, so do these 2 blocks, the first 4 layers of the Qigong practice, does that make sense, Santina, or anybody else? If you have questions, Mike, welcome to the group. Karen, Shayna, any questions about these first 4 layers of change in the Qigong system that we've created?
It makes sense.
Now, when we talk about these in the group chat, it's because questions arise. So I don't come into a group chat like, today we're talking about hydrostasy. If people ask certain questions, that determines, you know, where we're at as a group in the system or individually in the system. So it's always relative to you. And then the final layer of change, which we haven't talked much about for that exact reason, because the questions aren't really arising and things aren't really, it's not time yet. If we're not asking the questions, then very likely we're not ready for the answers anyway. But I'm calling this the abstract principles. And one of the key characteristics of the abstract principles is we are interacting with energy directly. And I have created this because this is where I'm at in my practice. I am interacting with my energy body directly. I can feel it and I can actually show you. We have to be in person. I'm not skilled enough yet to do it over the internet. But if we're in person, I can show you. I can show you what some of this feels like. And we can do it. Especially if you're in this training, you'll understand it more. If you just came from an episode of anger and frustration, we might have a little trouble getting to the abstract principles, but I can still show it to you. So we're interacting with energy directly. And this gets back to that original and, you know, the primary reason that Qigong was created by the Chinese in the first place was this is the most important aspect of self-care, period. There is no, the way you eat is important. The way you sleep is important. The way you interact with other human beings is important. The way you interact with yourself is important. Muscle activation is important. Movement is important. Moving your energy directly with your mind is the most important. Does that make sense? And so the abstract principles are just principles to help us stay in that energy field, our attention on the energy body, in addition to the physical body, because eventually you won't really distinguish the two. There's no need for distinguishing the two. So everybody has heard of E equals MC square, right? We all know that. That's pretty common, right? Anybody here not know what E equals MC square means? And that's not the whole equation, of course. That's just the part that the hipsters have caught on to. I mean that with love too. When I say hipsters, that's not necessarily derogatory. Okay, it is, but I mean it with love. It's not derogatory. Okay, so E equals MC square. We all know what that is, but it's also how chi works. Chi works in the exact same way. Prana works in the exact same way, but it's not often talked about this way because a lack of understanding. So E equals MC square means that energy can aggregate and become visceral, thick, perceivable directly with the human eye. Energy and matter can do that, right? Obviously, because we're looking at a computer screen made of energy and matter, but it can also dissipate and disperse, entropy, air, sunlight, and other aspects of chi. So when we talk about chi, when we talk about prana, if you're giving it one definition, that's usually a lack of understanding. So if somebody says that prana is life force energy, they are very likely, and it's cool, and I don't mind, and I don't mean this in a derogatory fashion whatsoever, they very likely have a very rudimentary and shallow understanding of prana. Because prana, chi, these energies, it is E equals MC square. It is everything, and also the less perceivable aspects of the human and physical experience. So chi can be blood, chi can be hormones, chi can be immune response. Chi can also exist as an energy layer just outside of your skin that helps prevent illness. Chi can be something that's coursing through your body like energy, and acupuncture needles can interact with that nutritive chi. All this is just a way of talking about the same thing. Does that make sense? The Chinese just found a way to talk about the exact same thing that Einstein was talking about. He was talking about it more in an energy and physical matter way, where the Chinese were talking about it in a body, physical, human way. But we're really talking about
and its relationship to energy and its balance to it's still all the micro. It's
micro and macro.
Yes, none of those things that you named, the hormones, none of them exist singularly.
No.
There's a system that it follows, but it's within a larger system, which is within a larger system, which is the body, which is multiple system and trillions of cells, which operate within a larger system. Yeah.
About
and all related.
About 40 trillion cells, human cells, about 40 trillion non-human cells, to equal about 80 trillion to 100 trillion cells. Each cell is a living organism that gets even more detailed and even more detailed. So you can think of it this way. You have 80 to 100 trillion cells supporting your consciousness right now. That's what it's all doing. That's the big goal.
And that's just the inside.
And that's just the inside. Yeah. So yeah, size is irrelevant. It's a perceptual thing. Human beings have a contextual perception of the universe, and it's always within that context that we create size, that we create speed, that we create time. It's all relative to the human's context. There's actually no such thing. Does that make sense? That's I guess a little bit. We got a little. I don't want to say deep because that's weird, but We got very detailed, I would say. But that's the practice. So the abstract principles are things that I walk around with that are about a paragraph long, such as find the luminous state, which is something that I would just have to talk about in a complete separate thing, and I have. Find that luminous state and stay there. That's the goal. Just stay there. Everything else will work itself out. Do everything from there. All of your actions, all of your thoughts, if you have them, because you will have them. I still have thoughts, of course. Everything comes from that luminosity and it drips with it. It's now imbued with that luminosity. And so that's an example of an abstract principle. It would be completely abstract to a beginner in this practice. They would just think it's woo-woo and that we're just talking shit. And I get it. That's fine.
So, Ernest, what does it drip with? What's the it?
Everything. A consciousness, deliberate nature. Everything is, we know this, we talk about this. Everything is connected to everything. Everything has an energy field. Everything is
The interrelationship of everything.
the interrelationship
Would
of
it be
everything.
love?
We need definition. The human being has a tendency to create words, and sometimes these words circulate through the human species and they lose their contextual value. And when a word loses its contextual value, it now has no value other than the value you personally give it. So if I use the word love, I use the word love, and it was actually Lauren who helped me come to this concise statement. But love is connection without judgment. Judgment is opinion, opinionated base concepts and thoughts coming from your mind and your brain. We call a judge, we ask the judge in a court case to render their opinion. And because they're a judge, their opinion is law. But they are rendering their opinion and their opinion of the interpretation of the written laws. So judgment will happen. In our system, though, we'll recognize that and we won't entertain it. We won't go down those rabbit holes of opinions about other people. Discernment, deduction, reason, logic, those things are not judgment because they're not necessarily opinions. You're just observing that the tree has fallen in your path and that you got to do something about that if you want to keep walking down the sidewalk. You know, the opinion is, oh, this is terrible. This keeps happening to me. This is because Abraham Hicks said that I'm creating it, yada, yada, yada. Those are all opinions. Those are judgments. So yes, to answer your question, it is love because we are making a connection to everything, ourselves, our environment. There's no more distinction between the two. And there is an electrochemical, physiological, and hormonal response from this. And it typically feels very nice. And we would call that love. I call that love. That's not likely what other people are going to say. Most people are just using the word love to describe a pleasurable emotion. Sometimes that emotion is infatuation and a type of attachment. And it feels good, and it feels so good because so many hormones and things are being produced and so many receptors are firing and yada yada, that we want to use one of these high words in the human experience, such as God and love. So if I use that word, though, it just means connection without judgment, which is why you can love a child the same that you love a cat, and you can love a cat the same that you love life and you love the world. And that is actually the definition that we all really want to arrive at. Unconditional, because there is no condition, because there is no judgment. It just requires connection. That's how my grandpa was able to create a paper that he wrote to himself called The Love in War, because he was literally a stone throw away from German soldiers in the invasion of Italy. And he was looking up at the stars and he had this idea
From
that
a foxhole.
he was in a foxhole. Yeah. No, not a fox. Those were trenches. Those were dug in long trench systems. That's nitpicking. Sorry, Donna. But yeah, same thing. So he's in a that's actually also an example of cognitive attention training. I was aware of my own thoughts. I was aware of what I said. I didn't try to prevent it. I didn't try to control, but I noticed it. It was kind of nitpicking Donna's statement. Just as an example. I know I'm not chastising. I'm giving an example of what behavioral and cognitive attention looks like. And then you recognize it and you're like, oh, and then just, move on, and hopefully you remember that later, and that's called learning. And then when you express what you've learned, that's called wisdom. But yes, to answer your question in a very long and 10,000 word way,
Yes.
Santina, yes, I would define what we're doing in the abstract principles and hydrostasy as the untainted definition of the word love.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah, you can ask 100
So,
questions. That's
all
fine.
right, the luminous state, you said it drips with it. Does that it change with every individual, or is there a one it?
Well, now we're kind of looking at things. We're trying to take the infinite and put it back into an it or not it. So I would say both and neither. What is really interesting, Santina, and notice that I have put mostly felt in hydrostasy. That's also the same with the abstract principles, because we actually start to go away from this binary way of looking at things, where something can actually have the essence of binary opposites, and they can be both at the same time. So when we talk about dripping with it can be very personal, but it's also very universal at the same time.
All right, so would that be when the sphere starts spinning?
Which sphere?
Remember when back in the early days when things.
You could look at it that way. Yeah,
Okay,
because
okay,
the sphere is hydrostasy.
okay.
Now save this whiteboard because it's a good one.
Yes, I took a picture of it.
I forget to save whiteboards sometimes, and I'll post this in our group chat so that you have it. And this will be a very familiar picture to folks in class right now, or in the study right now. But I draw hydrostasy on an infinite line because there is no end. And I put a line and I put a dot in the middle for contextual reference, but we're never at center. The human being is we live in a wavelength universe, so we're constantly kind of bouncing back and forth like an electron around its probability cloud. Or sorry, I don't know if that might have been a little too physics, but basically we're just bouncing back and forth at all times. You moved. So you put yourself in a whole new situation. When I did my spring cleaning, I put pollen and dust and fur into the air. I wasn't at center. I had to have acupuncture because I took myself out of center accidentally. But I learned the next time that I do spring cleaning, I'm damn well going to wear a mask, because I don't.
So that represents balance is what you're showing us.
And that balance always changes. And then this is hydrostasy, is this circle.
Yep.
This circle, we can easily, and you can actually go outside of the circle. We just don't want to live there.
Right.
If you have to run into a burning building and save a baby, that's out here in your hydrostasy circle. That's okay. You're not going to try to live there. And that's what some people do. When we see Abraham Hicks on the high flying disc, that's why joy is actually one of the evils in traditional Chinese medicine. Is joy evil? No, but people want to live there. People want to, and just so we have contextual reference for the word joy, they view that as an excited state. So to give that word definition so we can work with it. So we can exist in an extreme for a short time. The human being does it every time you go up a set of stairs. We don't really want to live there, though. We don't want to go upstairs all day, because we can't do that. We won't have the energy for that. And it will be horrible on your knees over a long period of time to just go upstairs constantly. So we can exist outside of the hydrostasy bubble, but not for very long. If we're in our hydrostasy practice, we feel this dynamic. This dynamic isn't something that we need to think about or seek therapy for or ask another person about necessarily. Keep in mind that this circle is also not static. It's moving. And so I'm drawing these arrows going different directions to imply that it's actually a spinning circle. Just like yin and yang is not a static figure, and it's not about yin and yang. It's about yin changing into yang, yang changing into yin, and the interconnected nature of all things. So if somebody tells you that yin and yang is about opposites, again, that is very likely just a rudimentary understanding of the yin-yang theory. And that's okay. Every understanding most likely started somewhat rudimentary, and that's okay. That's not derogatory.
It's like understanding E equals MC squared.
Yeah, we can look at it in a very physical, mathematical way, or we can look at it in a very general and rudimentary way. Both are okay. So yeah, we're all good. Of course, I can look at this in a very detailed way just because that's how my mind works. You know, I'm very attuned to this type of thing. My brain loves to organize shit. It just does. Most brains do, but I embrace that personally, and that's an earnest characteristic, perhaps. The bent of my personality. As Don Juan would say, it's my temperament. That's my thing. I've created that. So ideally in hydrostasy, we are able to discern through how we feel where we are on this continuum. Are we out of balance? Because this is going to have to start to move quicker to try to because the universe is always trying to recapture balance. It's trying to reestablish balance. Entropy balance, entropy balance, entropy balance, entropy balance. It is the thing. Your heartbeat. This is the wavelength. Entropy balance, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. So we see this permeating visibly all throughout the entire universe. Our planet is physically contracting and expanding in a very micro way every single day, all day.
So balance is an activity. It's not a state.
It's an activity, is not a static state. That is also a misinterpretation. And when we look at paper, sometimes we arrive at those ideas because the paper's not moving. So we're like, oh, this is a static thing. It's not. Nothing is static. We can't ever talk about anything in a static fashion because that would be a violation of the transience principle. And again, Santina, everything that we're talking about is based on some principle. So I'll be able to trace it back to a principle of nature. So does that kind of start to make sense when we talk about our circle and our balance is always changing? Let's say a person wants to do very intense exercise. They can go to an extreme and live there, and they'll probably suffer a little bit. They may be able to reestablish balance around that intensity, but they didn't necessarily do it in the most energy efficient way. Most teachers aren't going to tell you to go from 0 to 60, and that's good. That's how you want to do it. Some people may have success, but I'm going to guess, and I'll probably be able to show them if I follow them around every day for a little while, where they're losing energy, where some area is suffering because of this rapid change. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, like that CrossFit training I try to keep my grandkids doing. It's insane.
Well, but here's a principle though. If somebody were to work themselves up to CrossFit and they were to maintain CrossFit for the rest of their lives, that could be inside of their balance, their hydrostasy circle. It could be, right? Because that's the principle. The principle is we work up to it, we change in a steady fashion, we change with change. That is adaptation. That's called going with the Tao rather than against it. But we won't declare a war on intense exercises because a person can do that for the rest of their life to some degree.
As long as they adapt appropriately.
As long as they adapt appropriately and as long as they maintain it. It requires consistency. So we see people who go really hardcore in their 25s and 40s, especially in men, because they're sex muscles. You know, it's all a part of a mating ritual. There's very little functionality to certain muscles. The more I learn about anatomy, this really just drives home that we're not building the muscles for functionality because you're a firefighter or a lumberjack. You just want somebody to find you sexy. It's just a part of a very elaborate human mating ritual, and I'm not declaring war on that. That's fine. But if that's not maintained, how do they end up when they're 50, 60, 70, 80? They probably won't make it to 80, quite frankly. But they definitely don't have that body that they did when they were 35 because they're not maintaining it. And now they're upsetting their system of homeostasis and balance. Does that make sense? And we can look at this in ecosystems. We can look at this in solar systems. We can look at this in universe systems, or excuse me, solar system, galaxy systems. So we can see this in galaxies. We can see this in the atom. So this again is in principle, but this is the principle of balance. And I think that answers your question. In hydrostasy, we're feeling this. In the first 2 layers of change, we're trying to get out of our own damn way so that we can even perceive this. Because most likely, most human beings they don't know they have a stomach until it hurts. And a lot of the actions and thoughts and behaviors are completely disadvantageous to the human being and the human species in general. It's insane. It's crazy. In some cases, it's just plain stupid.
And again, we might be able to understand this. One might be able to understand this cognitively, and it resonates and it makes perfect sense. But if there's no practice, you don't feel you don't feel what it feels like. So we can label it whatever we want, but if you're not practicing balance within this definition and understanding, then the hydrostasy effect is really only something that can be felt.
And so when we talk about that, there's this concept, and this concept will come up more as we go through the system. But ting is sensitivity. So this is going to be familiar to Donna because she was a nurse. If you want to get a very good reading on somebody's pulse, you have to be sensitive. You don't necessarily squeeze into their arm. The deeper you go, the more you're going to feel the pulse. That's not necessarily true. You want to use your finger pads and have some sensitivity on the finger pad to, at first at least, gently try to perceive the pulse. Some people will look away. There it is instantly. The moment I look away, the moment I close my eyes, I can perceive it. That's called getting out of your own way so that you can directly sense the present moment and what's going on in it. Touch a refrigerator with a rowdy mind, you will not feel its vibration. Close your eyes, sink your breath, put your energy into balance and into the earth, and then touch that refrigerator. And it's like, oh my God, the whole thing is moving. Like, this is amazing.
But with practice, you can take a pulse and have a conversation with somebody at the same time because it's the practice.
Yes. Oh, good example. I'm not there yet in my physical. That's a physical skill. I'm not in that I haven't accumulated. That's the cumulative principle. And I haven't done it. Yeah.
It's just technique.
Yeah. Technique and practice. You got to practice it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's where skill comes in. Skill is something that you practice and you get better at. That's it. That's the definition of skill. If you can't practice and you can't get better, it's not a skill. So ting will come in very handy as we move through our practice, and it is definitely something I talk about. I actually start to talk about that in counterbalance, because counterbalance is framed through Tai Chi because it's the Tai Chi mind. So we will talk about ting in the counterbalance phase. Does that make sense? More questions? So I've been doing a reasonably good job, which again, if you watch me, you've been watching me for the past 5 years, you know that this is learning, this is growing, and this is a process, but I've actually been sticking to my 1.5-hour time commitment. So we are at about 1.5 hours, but if anybody has any, final questions before we go, one thing I would say, oh, no, do you have any final questions? I keep doing that. Do you have any questions? And then I just go into another spiel. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like me to add before I make this final point? Okay, so we build on what I call the Gong checklist. And I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'll be able to do this like exactly how I have it in the book, but you can create a checklist for yourself, such as begin. Yeah, I spelled that right. Begin as soon as you wake up. Prepare objects of power. Objects of power are things to remind you of your practice. A bracelet, a sticky note, a note card, a tattoo, writing on the walls, anything that you can creatively come up with that you can take with you and that has like physical mass that can remind you to be present. So we have our object.
Do you still do that?
What's that? Oh, I still do that.
You carry objects of power?
Fuck yeah. Yeah, I'm in Chicago, the island of the practical. You're damn straight. I'm going to have my objects of power. I'll always have I'll be 110 years old in the garden. And if you drop out of the sky and say, Ernest, where's your object of power? I'm pulling something out of my pocket. Yeah, I still carry my note card. Although I did take Donna's advice and I've been carrying around an entire sheet of folded up paper so that I can study on the train and stuff. So rather than just a note card, I'm using an entire piece of graph paper so that I can put more on the paper and waste less space. This is all graph paper behind me. And I'll take one of them with me every day to help me be more present and help me be moving my mind in a direction that I want it to go, rather than thinking, as the Michael term that I have incorporated into the system, thinking dumb shit. We don't want to be, yeah, I read Donna's lips there. Yeah, thinking dumb shit. So do we have a note card with us? How about our toolbox? Is our toolbox, and toolbox are points of attention intended in advance. How many of those are we prepared with today? Is our toolbox ready and plentiful? Are we segmenting? Segmenting is creating individual sections of your day so that you can have specific tricks of attention in those specific tricks of or in the specific parts of the day, because we all live different lives. You know, if Donna was a firefighter or a police officer, she would need to segment her day differently than a dentist or a construction worker who gets up early or something, you know. So we all have different lifestyles and different days, so we'll segment differently. Have we
I found that I need to go back to an early practice of making my transitions a segment in and of themselves. So walking from the house to the car, walking from the car to the building, my transitions, I noticed the dip
Hey,
in
honey.
my practice.
I'm on a class. I'm on a Zoom class.
So we had walking, sitting, laying down. What am I missing? We have walking, sitting, laying, and standing.
Standing.
So are we prepared with these 4 modes? And I mean, so maybe, and again, I'm pulling off of old data, but I like to use Michael as an example because I've seen him ride the train. Are we prepared with points of attention while standing on the train? Oh, a seat opens up. Now we're sitting on the train. As Donna pointed out, did we pay attention to the transition between the two? Or are we just plopping our body down like a ton of bricks because that's what we're habitually used to? So basically, and I won't go too much deeper into the checklist, but where's our checklist? Where is our practice for the day? Are we just hoping that this shit comes together magically by itself? Or are we putting intention? Are we putting intention into the practice? You know, do we have our rule of 3, which is the biggest aspect of counterbalance, is what we still call the rule of 3. That hasn't changed. How many times did we rule of 3 yesterday? If we're not in hydrostasy, and even in hydrostasy, rule of 3 is there and ready and waiting if we need it. But if we're not in hydrostasy, we're in counterbalance, and counterbalance relies on the rule of 3. How many times did you rule of 3 when you found yourself in a violation of principle? Thinking, trying to, not just thinking, excuse me, but thinking in a way that doesn't serve us, repetitive, habitual, not making us feel well, comparing, contrasting, trying to figure things out, labeling, judging, comparing, compartmentalizing. All of things can be rabbit holes. And when you're doing that, the mindfulness slider, you are not engaging the world around you as much as you could be. And quite frankly, in Chicago, you're now a target. People will target the distracted mind. When you take a self-defense class in a city, the very first thing they teach you is not a punch or a block. They teach you how to be more aware in your environment, because the vast majority of people who are being robbed and jacked, they have victim energy. They're distracted. They're not paying attention. They seem, you know, unconfident in themselves. That's the person people want to rob. Also, if you have something flashy, you know, now they have an object that they want to take. So I'll leave you with this. Everybody who's practicing Gong, where's your checklist? Or do you have one? If you don't have one, you're probably not doing Gong. I'm just being honest. Like, you may be remembering certain aspects of Gong throughout the day, which would be very basic alignment-ish, and that's okay. But if we're moving into counterbalance and warrior training, we should have a checklist. In warrior training, 100%. Like, without a doubt, we should have our Gong checklist. We should be prepared for our battlegrounds. We should be ready to move in and out of you know, different aspects of our practice as needed. Where is our breath? Where is our body? What points of attention do we plan to use today? What techniques of breathing, techniques of imagination, physical things? Where is it? Or are we just kind of hoping because we did yoga today for an hour that everything is just going to magically come together and we'll live Shavasana because we had 15 minutes of it this afternoon? Any questions before we head out? I want to leave you with the Gong checklist.
My G is sticking on my keyboard, so I keep writing Olden instead of Golden. Sorry.
Oh, is that in the chat? Golden line. Yeah. Golden line would be in alignment to traditional Chinese medicine to a certain extent, but it's actually just the three dantians, the upper dantian, middle dantian, and lower dantian, and a line between them for physical alignment. That is really similar to the Tai Chi physical practice that we start to embody on a psychological and physical level, posture. Why would we give a shit about posture? Like, are we trying to impress people? No, posture will equal physical relaxation. When we have physical relaxation, we can introduce that to the breath. And then with our breath, we will have more physical relaxation with our breath. And before you know it, you can start to embody a smooth and efficient form of breathing. Which Dan Brule, oh, I have his book right here that I can just hold up. But Dan Brule is a guy that I've never met, and I don't think I probably ever will, but he wrote this book called Just Breathe, and some of it's kind of, it's fine. But there are other aspects, such as the three convergences of breath, that I arrived to that also. So I'm seeing a consistency, and I'm like, yay, we found a consistency, which is the three convergences of breath. And I'll just tell you real quick before we go, so I don't leave you on a cliffhanger. The three convergences of breath is awareness of breath, and the smooth and relaxed nature of breath. And he actually kind of separates those two: physical relaxation and then the smooth and unobstructed breath. So those three things. All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns? And how do we get the physical relaxation? Through posture. And I did mute you real quick, Santina. Sorry, there was just a little background. I don't know if you knew that. But yeah, I will upload this to YouTube. I'm probably going to post this to Facebook too, just because it is a nice overview of the Gong system. But yeah, that's it. Soon we'll have 2 books ready. And then the 2 books will be delivered in a website and school. And I'm taking all of the focus off of me. eKrolik.com is going away because it's not about Ernest. It's about Gong. It's about mind management. It's not about personal I and self, which is one of the violations of principles in warrior training, is focusing on the incessant tendency for the human being to focus on me, I, self, in thought. That doesn't mean we can't have self-care, because that's in action. All right, Michael, Karen, Santina, Shayna, Donna, any questions before we head out? All right. Otherwise, I will see everybody who can make it next week, next Wednesday, 6 a.m. And if you have questions, you can send me a question in the meantime. That's actually the best way for me to remember a topic to bring into the next class. Send me a message and say you want to talk about that. I'm happy to cover any aspect of the practice, because if you ask the question, that means you may be more inclined to grasp, for lack of a better word right now, grasp the answer. Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, and I wish you the best with, I almost say good luck, but that's one I'm also phasing out of my vocabulary. I wish you the best with your deliberate mindfulness practice, or mind intentional practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and I will see you guys again soon.
Yep.
All right. Bye, everyone.